Okay, it's going.
Overflowing, but
It's
getting that water street should be good.
So am I good to start?
well, just give it a sec. We usually just chat for a little bit to let people
Log
get
in.
get on as well. So
Okay. Well, I want this to be the most attended one since I'm giving the introduction. I guess
you could go share it on your Facebook page right now.
I have tons of friends.
I mean, I've got like 500, so I don't think any of them have ever watched any of our Facebook lives.
I've got like 12 and 3 of you are in attendance, so.
That's a good point.
You guys are good to start.
We're good to start.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, we got people jumping on. I think you're good to kick us off.
Okay. We want to thank everyone that's being a part of this today. This is our 7th episode of our Vineyard Facebook Live series. This specific one, we're going to be speaking with our chief building official, George Reid, and what they're seeing in the building department. We also have our city manager, Jake, here, and myself, Chris. I'm from the city council. So we want to invite all of you, as you have questions, please reach out. We'll get as many of them answered as we can. As we've seen construction increase here in the city and throughout the state of Utah over the past couple of years, it makes me realize and think about how important building codes are. If you can imagine if there was a world with no building codes, you can imagine the different types of projects that would get thrown up and the issues that you would see long-term with them. And one thing that we are really proud of here in Vineyard is the quality of construction work that gets done. So as we talk about that, as you have thoughts or questions or something that you've always wanted to ask and haven't been able to get to the right person, please do so in this episode. We're here. We'll rely heavily on George and his expertise, and Jake and I will fill in the gaps where we can.
Yeah, Chris, that was a good intro. I recently finished a basement in my house, and I got a permit before I did it, and I'm sure our building inspector in Mapleton, where I live, came through and scratched his head at some of the decisions I had made, and I'm sure George has lots of stories of things that need to be fixed, and I know there's lots of people that don't even realize that when you're finishing a basement or when you're doing little projects around your house, what needs a permit, what doesn't need a permit. So I know the building department gets questions about that all the time. So I think George is going to talk specifically today about some of the home improvement aspects. So finishing basements and adding pergolas and patios and stuff like that. And when the building department really needs to get involved and kind of why they get involved from a safety aspect and helping make sure that the things that are built in the city are built to a certain standard. So George, you want to take us away?
Can I ask one quick question, George?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
One thing that I didn't realize when, before getting involved with the city, whether that be on the planning commission or city council, is how often building codes actually get updated. And maybe that's a place you can talk or start from and let people how often it gets updated, what you do at the Capitol every year as we see changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So for residential code, that code gets adopted statewide, as all of our codes do. The residential code is on a 6-year cycle. However, within that 6-year cycle, pretty much every year we have updates to the adopted code to amend things that may come up, new products, whatnot, or changes that the Uniform Building Code Commission sees fit. So any code change goes through the UBCC and gives recommendations to the legislative body. So it's constantly being worked on, but the additions themselves for single family homes and whatnot, they're adopted every 6 years. So, as pretty much everybody in Vineyard knows, we have basically a brand new community and a lot of brand new homes. And with that, people want to make improvements, as they get settled into their new home. They want to, maybe finish the basement or put in a fire pit or, maybe a basketball hoop or whatnot. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to reach out to the residents and see what projects they had in mind for their homes. And we sent out an assemble poll, and of the participants we had, it looked like the majority were planning some sort of home improvement project this year. And we wanted to kind of talk about the process and what's required, and you know, kind of some ins and outs of how to make it through the process with little ease as possible. So kind of to start off, the whole intent of the building code and obtaining a building permit is to provide safety within the built environment. And we consider a built environment anything that is constructed or you know, put in the ground or whatnot, anything that increases the environment. Now, when we say safety, we're obviously looking at safety of you know, your home, trying to get prevent fires, things like that, if in the event of an emergency, getting people out and keeping people safe. But we're also looking at safety in terms of financial safety. So when somebody purchases a home, that's the biggest investment they're most likely ever going to make in their life. And you know, people need to have the security that they're doing so in a manner that their investment's going to be protected. And that's you know, one of the big aspects of building codes. Now, one of the things we do up at the state capitol is we evaluate the building codes and the costs that they have. And there's a fine balance between you know, say energy code and cost savings energy wise and the actual cost of construction. So you know, the legislature, they consider that heavily when adopting the amendments in the codes. But really, safety is the intent of the building code and building permits. We get a lot of questions on what requires a building permit. And let's see if I can share my screen here. It'll be easier to share.
All right, I think I've given you the ability to do that, George.
Let's see. Get the right one here. Okay, can you see the permits? Is that the one? Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the way that the building code works is it basically says that any owner or authorized agent who intends to construct, enlarge, alter, repair, move, demolish, or change occupancy of a building or structure, basically anytime you plan to do anything to a structure, it requires a building permit. Now there's exceptions that don't require a building permit. And so we have to make sure if you're constructing something that it falls within one of those exemptions for building permit. And that's the only time that a building permit is not required. Now, one thing that we see a lot of here in Vineyard is the one-story detached accessory structures, you know, such as your sheds, your pergolas, things like that. If those are under 200 square feet, a building permit is not required. Now, there's a couple caveats to that, in that if there's electrical in the structure, the electrical portion requires a building permit, or if you're planning on doing any plumbing or anything like that, then a building permit is required for that. And then one thing to keep in mind is, even though a building permit is not required, it's still required to meet all the applicable codes, especially our zoning code, which for sheds have a required setback. Typically it's 3 feet from property line. If it's within 6 feet of the primary structure, then it actually has to meet the setbacks of that structure. So really the best thing to do, if there's any questions on this, is give the building department a call and see if a permit's required and what the setbacks are, because we'd hate to have anybody build something and then have to change it later. So fences over 7 feet, or I should say fences under 7 feet do not require a building permit. Retaining walls under 4 feet, sidewalks, driveways. Now, again, be aware that on sidewalks and driveways, there are city code requirements that only allow you to have a certain percentage of hard surface in your front yard. So if you're planning on doing a third car drive or whatnot, or RV parking, give us a call and we can make sure that the area is going to be met. Other things that are exempt are papering, wallpaper, painting, tile, carpeting, cabinets, countertops, and similar finish work, prefabricated swimming pools, swings, playground structures, window awnings, things like that, and then decks. We do get a lot of decks here in Vineyard. If the decks are less than 200 square feet, not attached to the house, and less than 30 inches above grade, they do not require a building permit. If they are attached to the house, they do require a building permit. And same thing with pergolas or shade structures. If they are attached to the house and not freestanding, it doesn't matter what the size is, a building permit is still required. Anytime you're doing electrical, that requires a building permit unless it's replacing a fixture, and things like that. Just simple work, or if it's low voltage. Anytime you're running gas lines, things like that, those obviously require building permits. Adding air conditioning units, things like that, come in, pull a permit for that. With plumbing, any repairs you can do without a building permit, but if it requires you to tear into a wall or a floor or whatnot, a building permit is required, but we want you to fix the leak or whatever hazard may be present first, and then come in and get a building permit the next day after the leak stopped and you're not creating more damage with a repair. Anything beyond that basically requires a building permit. Now, our building permit process, we have, let's see if I can get to move this. So if you go to our website, vineyardutah.org, and go to government, and then under departments, just the building department tab.
While you're doing that, George, Neely just asked a question and said, what about a cement patio?
Cement patios.
The back of the house.
That's a great question. Cement patios don't require a building permit. However, it's always good to check. There's public utility easements and storm drain easements, things like that, that it's good to be aware of. You don't want to cover any of those up if there's an issue and they have to tear that up. Now that you can put concrete over a public utility easement, but it's just kind of a risk that you're assuming if you do so.
And George, in terms of those utility easements, they would call directly to those companies, Blue Stake, that kind of stuff, to find where those are at.
They can actually call the building department or the engineering department, and we can look those up on the plats and identify those for the property owners. So here in our building department tab, if you click on apply for building permit, if you're new to applying for a building permit, you'll want to create a new builder account, and it'll take you through the process of creating that account and uploading the files that are needed for the type of building permit you're going to be doing. Now,
hey, George, can I ask a really easy question?
Yes.
So typically when I look at something that says new builder, I think, well, I'm not a builder. I'm not. So for somebody who's not a general contractor, subcontractor, have that license, this still applies there, correct? We would still go through that same process.
Absolutely. It still applies. We'll get to the owner builder certification form, but yes, when submitting an application, new builder, doesn't matter if you're homeowner doing the work yourself or contractor, you'll still use the new builder account. Now, if you don't want to create an account and go through the portal, we still accept paper applications, and you can bring those into the office, and we can take those through paper if you don't want to use the portal itself. The portal is a great tool for seeing where your permit is in the process, scheduling inspections, things like that. So we really recommend to use the portal, but if you choose not to, we'll still gladly accept the application at the counter.
We've made it about as user-friendly as we can, and we're not doing many paper applications at this point, are we?
No, not many at all. In fact, the majority of paper applications we get, by, I would say 95%, are owner builder applications that don't want to create a user account because they're just going to do one small project or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, the system is designed to accommodate the, you know, owner builders building a pergola to our contractors that are building 140 unit apartment complexes. So, you know, we've tried to design the system so that it accommodates everybody's needs. So we'll just take a basement finish, for example. Like Jake said, to finish a basement, a building permit is required. We try to make it as painless as possible. The fees are typically approximately right about $300, depending on if you're doing a walkout or not. If you're doing a walkout entrance with it, it's typically around $400. And those fees, the city administration and council have approved those fees so that we're actually spending more money on basement finishes than the city's collecting. And city council and whatnot feel that that's important to make sure that it's affordable for homeowners to pull that building permit and go through the process. So the documents that we would need is a plan showing the layout of the basement, the dimensions, windows, any load-bearing walls that are in the basements, any load-bearing walls that are planning to be taken out. If you are doing a walkout, then we would need a site plan, which site plan just shows the property lines and the existing structure. We would need a site plan as well for a pergola or shade structure, anything like that. We need a basic electrical layout, you know, all your fixtures, plumbing fixtures. If you have your furnace in the basement, we'll want to see the location of the furnace. And really what we're looking for is we're looking for any code violations that we can identify in a paper stage rather than once it's constructed. It's a lot easier to make those changes on paper than once it's actually constructed and we identify a violation. But we have all the requirements for that plan here. Once you have a plan that gives us the information that's listed on the website here, you can go through the portal or bring it into our counter for the application, submit that, and then we begin the plan review process. The plan review process typically takes about 5 business days to go through on a basement finish or a small project. As part of that submittal, if you are planning on doing the work yourself, like Chris had mentioned, we do have the owner builder certification that we are going to be asking for. And the owner builder certification is what the Department of Professional Licensing has given to homeowners to allow them to do work on their own property. construction is a licensed, regulated trade. And, basically everything that's done construction-wise has to be done by a licensed professional unless they qualify as an owner builder. And an owner builder, you have to be the sole owner of the property. You have to be doing the work for yourself. And the owner builder certification kind of goes through those requirements. One thing that the owner builder certification does is it says that if you plan to hire anybody, that any person that you hire to help you with the work, they have to be a licensed contractor. The exception to that is you can still do a good old fashioned barn raising or whatnot and have your neighbors come help you, but it has to be in token compensation only. So if you want to pay your neighbors in root beer and pizza, they can come help you. But as soon as money's exchanged hands, then they do need to be a licensed professional. So after we go through the plan review process, then we let you know that your application has been accepted and approved. The building permit's then pulled, and then we begin the inspection process. Now, during the inspection process, really the best rule of thumb is to give us a call and ask if an inspection is needed before you cover anything up that will be permanently covered up. We've had instances where people pull a building permit for a basement, they complete the basement and never requested an inspection. And we try to educate and get those inspected as are needed, but it is kind of hard to go through the whole process with an owner builder. So good rule of thumb is call and ask. If you have any questions, by all means, please give us a call.
What are the typical steps for a basement finish, George?
So the typical steps are a four-way inspection. So your four-way inspection is your framing, electrical, plumbing, and mechanical.
So just before you put the sheetrock up, right?
Correct. So just before you put the sheetrock up with your insulation. So again, it's before you cover something up. So that inspection is typically done, and then we typically find some corrections that need to be made at that inspection, and we'll allow the insulation inspection to be done with the reinspection of the four-way. After the insulation and four-way inspection has been approved, then we do a drywall inspection. And the drywall inspection, we want to do that inspection before mud and tape. So we want to see the attachment of the drywall to the walls and the ceiling. After drywall, if there's a shower pan that's being installed, we want to look at the shower pan. If there's fireplaces or anything like that where gas lines are going to be run on the exterior of drywall, but behind cabinetry or whatnot, we want to see those. And then basically after those inspections, then it's the final inspection once everything is complete. Once a basement is inspected and approved, we don't issue a certificate of occupancy. We do, if you're planning on doing an accessory dwelling unit within that basement, after that basement is approved, then you can start the accessory dwelling unit process.
Are there?
That's another application with the city. We've tried to make all of those as simple as possible and streamlined as possible, so there's no incentive for you to not want to come into the city. We've tried to make it so that there's not really a burden on people to go through the process, and so that we can make sure that the basements are all constructed in a safe manner.
George, are there any is there any additional work? So for example, if somebody was finishing their basement and planning to do the ADU, I mean, I've heard other places sometimes require double sheetrock or something like that. Are there, and sometimes it's just hearsay, are there other things that have to be done if you're doing an ADU in the basement versus just a regular basement finish that you're using for your own owner occupied?
There's no real additional requirements, and Jake was going to kind of get into House Bill 82 that was just passed this year. And I won't touch a lot on that, but Vineyard, when we were establishing our ADU process, we did it such that it's still considered a single family dwelling and not a duplex. And because of that, we don't have the additional drywall or any fire separation that would be different from a regular basement finish. Our current process, we do require an additional exterior entrance in order to qualify as an ADU. That has changed, and we'll be making changes to our code accordingly. But really, no, there's no additional requirements other than maybe some paperwork. Obviously, most ADUs want to have a kitchen in those ADUs, and if a secondary kitchen is constructed, one of the documents we require is an accessory or a secondary kitchen occupancy restriction letter, basically saying that you don't intend on renting out the basement as a secondary unit. Now, the ADU process changes that recorded document. So it'll go in and supersede that occupancy restriction form and allow the accessory dwelling to be considered as basically a rental unit.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to start talking about that, George. The legislative session in the state of Utah, some legislatures are open all year, but in Utah, it runs from mid-January to the 1st of March. Our legislative session this year ended on March 5th. And one of the bills that was passed this year was House Bill 82, and it addressed specifically two main things that involve the city. Really the description of a family and what's allowed to live in a house, because in the past it had to be either a related family or 4 unrelated individuals. And so House Bill 82 kind of changed that because in the past you couldn't rent out a house with 2 of your friends and your cousin, or because 2 of you were related. So they kind of changed that so that restriction went away. And then they also changed some of the city requirements for ADUs. In the past, this has all been regulated at a city level, but the state came in and kind of clarified that so that it's more of a standard from city to city. It didn't really impact our city too much because we kind of were already doing the regulation the way they wanted it done. And so the state created a lot size minimum. So if you have a lot size bigger than 6,000 square feet, you're allowed to put an ADU in. And I believe ours was at 5,500 right before that. So we were right there anyways. And then the other requirement that the state put in is that you have to have an off-street parking stall. So one additional off-street parking stall, you can't count the garage or the driveway that you were required to build with your initial house. So there's got to be one additional off-street parking stall, and your lot size has to be 6,000 square feet. Other than that, they've pretty much allowed ADUs to operate throughout the cities. I think there's some clarification in there that a certain percentage of the zones, the residential zones in cities, can be restricted. We haven't adopted any of that. It's just a lot size minimum in Vineyard. So yeah, that's House Bill 82. It passed, and what I believe it was signed into law by the governor last week. So, but like I said, it really won't change too much of what we were doing. We weren't charging any additional fees or making anybody jump through any other hoops that we had to get rid of. It really did conform with kind of the process that we had already established. So do you think they have any questions about 82? Neely, do we have any questions that have come up at all?
Not since that first one.
Okay.
Can I ask, jumping off of that, George, another question about, so when you see, are you seeing owner builders, do you see a significant time difference from the time they start to build out their basement and finish it compared to hiring a general contractor?
Yes, we do see definitely significant time differences. One of the big ones is the permitting process, and we do a lot of education on how to prepare the plans and whatnot. And it's on an individual basis when people are submitting, but it does go back and forth quite a bit, trying to make sure that we're proceeding in the right direction. Whereas most general contractors know what we're looking for and things like that. And then also on in the construction stage, there's some things like fire blocking and whatnot, and some electrical that may seem fairly easy, and do it yourself tackle it, but a lot of times it ends in having to redo a fair amount of work, because unfortunately our city manager encountered.
Hey, I wasn't going to name.
Sorry to tell on you, Jake.
My wife expected the basement to be done much quicker than it got done, and I think just doing it, after work and on the weekends, it definitely slows the process down.
Yeah, and it's kind of a leading question, but just to kind of give a state of where the construction industry is at and things like, obviously, if you were to go buy lumber from Home Depot or Lowe's or someplace right now, as an owner builder, you're going to see quite a bit of cost increases in those materials that have come about from, COVID and supply chain and things like that. And that falls over into different type of materials, or even labor if you're out hiring a certified subcontractor that's licensed to do some of the work as well. So, as you're contemplating, and I'm not saying either way is better, there's obviously a good choice for every individual choosing what they want to do. Just kind of take those things into account as you're looking to do a lot of these projects, and understand that, there will be more time, as Jake is talking about. Your wife might not be happy with you as it takes longer, and it might still end up costing you the same amount in the end if you have to redo some work as well. So there's just a lot to think about as you go through and want to do a project, whether it be a basement, a pergola, a shed. And what I think the feedback that I've been given from neighbors and residents is they've just been really appreciative of the buildings department willingness to walk them through that, because it can be really daunting, as a resident thinking, well, I want to do it right, but how do I do that? So, the feedback I've received is they've been very willing to talk them through that process, which I think is just key of having a building department to do that. So thank you, George.
Yeah, George does a great job. His crew does a great job as well. One thing that I've noticed over the years is that they truly are servants of the community. They're there to help make sure that the work in the city is getting done correctly. So yeah, thank you, George. I'll echo Chris's comments there. Okay, Neely, any last questions that have come up? Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. Episode 7, we'll release some details shortly about what episode 8 is going to be. And if you have any questions that come up after this, we'll be happy to answer them over social media. But thanks for joining us today. And thanks, Chris, and thanks, George, for participating.
Thanks everyone.
See ya. Do I just hit end on?